Good afternoon, everyone. We did see a little bit of a rebound in the North American equity markets. This, of course, after some selling pressure in some key areas over the past couple of days, namely small cap stocks as well as tech stocks. The Dow and the S&P were up by about a half a percentage point. The TSX up by 0.1%. It was down by 0.2% yesterday. So again, not a lot of movement in the Canadian market. Importantly, the Nasdaq was up slightly on the day. So again, some stabilization going on there. And the Russell 2000, so the small cap index, was up by 2.2%. That's after 3 days of selling. In terms of the various sectors that were outperforming today, it was really financials led by the banks. They actually led the markets higher. Industrials, which were led higher by transportation companies. Materials also performed well, really led by steel companies. And some of the grocery stores within consumer staples also faring well. If you're looking for some ideas, I would check out Joe Rabel's interview with me about a week ago. He had a couple of those defensive areas of the market, those grocery stores that he was highlighting in terms of technical analysis and looking strong. WTI was down by 4.3% today, but was actually off the lows in terms of the pricing. Importantly here, the Suez Canal is still blocked, and it looks as though that could perhaps even take a couple of weeks to dislodge. They might have to dredge the canal and also unload some of the cargo and even perhaps the fuel. So keep that in mind when you think about freight costs. We might see some delays as ships have to go around Africa. So you could see some delays there. Apparently it's blocking about 200 ships right now. Away from that, when we think about the markets, no real directional drivers in terms of what we're seeing. Keep in mind that we will start to see first quarter results print over the next couple of weeks. So that might give us a bit of information in terms of which way the market wants to go. And of course, I really think that the market has been a stock picker's market over the past year or so. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking at stocks. So it takes a little bit more homework, but you can certainly also see some outsized performance. In terms of the themes, though, Fed policy support, they've been very supportive for risk on assets. But at the same time, there is concern that with the economy improving, perhaps they will start to taper sooner than later. We saw a taper tantrum going back in 2018, and that, of course, hit the markets or the stocks to the downside. So that's something that people are a little bit concerned about. Also, of course, the rate debate. Will we actually see the interest rate environment get away from the U.S. Fed, where they can't control the interest rate environment or the steepening of the yield curve? Just given all the stimulus that's been put out there or expected to be put out there, will the economy overheat? So that's another concern. And also, of course, the retail investor, which has been so prominent over the past number of months in terms of moving the markets higher. There's some chatter that, maybe the retail investor, the individual investor might be losing a little bit of interest here. We'll see. And then also, of course, there is a little bit of a concern that the large stimulus plan by the Democrats will be paid for by increasing taxes. These are all themes essentially that we've been talking about and continue to be talked about amongst strategists and investors. And therefore, which way do you want to go here? Do you want to put more money to work when we get a little bit of a dip, or are you profit taking? Away from that, a couple stocks to watch here. AstraZeneca efficacy for their vaccine trial. They did decrease to 76% from 79%. Restoration Hardware, that stock was up 9% today. They had some very strong fourth quarter results. And also they're seeing some increased demand for the first quarter. That's probably not surprising as we are staying at home and we want to have a nice home. Away from that, Darden Restaurants, they own Olive Garden as well as Longhorn. That stock was up by 8%. Their revenue and earnings were above expectations. Their guidance was also strong. So that's an interesting reopening trade. People going to restaurants, won't that be fun? And in terms of those U.S. markets, watch for PCE, core PCE inflation data out tomorrow morning. That's what the Fed cares about. That's the key inflation metric to watch. I should also mention that the initial jobs claims south of the border were below 700 for the first time since the pandemic. So, a strong reading on the jobs front in the United States in terms of the recovery. Here in Canada, quite quiet on a headline perspective. Financials were higher. Energy a little bit mixed, but reversing some earlier losses, that's for sure. Desjardins upgraded Crescent Point Energy, Cenovus, as well as Imperial. If you're looking for some energy stocks, those were some highlighted ones today. Canadian dollar did trade lower versus the U.S. dollar. And a number of analysts, the analysts over at BMO, CIBC, Raymond James, TD, Scotia, just to name a few, raised their price targets on APR.UN. That is Automotive Properties REIT. I actually own it. I bought it a while ago, being very patient. It's a reopening trade. They own the auto dealership properties. It's about a 7% yield now, so obviously it's come down a little bit, but I think I always thought it was kind of interesting. Away from that, on the headline front here in Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada did rule that the carbon tax is constitutional. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in the first quarter report highlighted that they are seeing some signs of overheating in the Canadian real estate market. And in terms of the Bank of Canada Governor Macklem, I mentioned to watch any kind of comment from him on a central bank panel today. Nothing that was market moving. Lastly, as it relates to COVID vaccines here in Canada, Trudeau did acknowledge concerns that the vaccine exports from Europe and India might be a little bit of a concern in terms of making sure we get them, but at the same time does think that Canada will receive those vaccines. I'll leave it there. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.